What do you think? Where people get failed in terms of selling what they love to build?
And I think the way sellers talk about them, hey, I do Sandler sales.
Sales is not a secure job. It's not going to be secure job if you are finding safety in it.
Recently mentioned that everyone says, hey, fail fast when you're building a startup. Fine, if you are failing, but hey, try your best not to fail.
Thank you for mentioning this. Okay, please,
humility through, most of them in the Indian SaaS space. Also,
you haven't reached out to me.
There are only few people whom I love talking, and after podcast, I realized that wow, what a podcast it was. This podcast is definitely like that. In this podcast, we have discussed that how Indian founders are not able to sell, and even they are able to sell, that what kind of product they should sell, and what exactly happening with the founder-led companies. Puneet have expertise to sell startups who have maybe one or two or just starting up or selling their product. They are into the MVP stage. So if you are a founder or maybe you are starting sales career, this podcast is definitely going to help you a lot. So keep watching. Don't forget to subscribe the channel. And yes, after watching this entire podcast, please share that what you have learned in the comment.
Hello, Puneet. Welcome on SaaS Podcast.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here.
Okay, so let's start with little bit introduction, right? That what exactly you're doing, what you are building, what exactly happening in your life. Let's start with that only.
Great. So I'm Puneet, and I'm building a Spyro, which is essentially an experimentation stack for founder-led sales. So think of it like a place where people who are founders like me, who come from a product or tech background and don't know anything about the world of GTM or selling, they can essentially figure out the right messaging, the right positioning, and also the right channels for finding their customers. Typically, when people which have a similar background to me, they don't even know about terminologies like ICP or sales cycles and stuff. So what we have done is we've basically broken down the entire journey of how a deal is converted into a bunch of sequences or steps, and you can pretty much kind of tinker around and experiment on them so that you can land on ideal versions of each of the things that I just mentioned. So that's what we are building in a nutshell.
Perfect. And how big your sales team is?
So we are a pretty small team. Like the total team size is 5 folks right now. I'm the only guy who's selling, to be honest. But I would say there's one more guy who's a founders office guy who's also helping me out here and there since he comes from a sales background. But apart from that, everyone else is looking into tech and product.
Perfect. This is what I wanted to know. When you are selling a product which only for the founder-led sales, how many sales people you need? So if it's only you, then this is a perfect product which you have figured out. So yeah.
Yeah, we built a product that, it's not, to be honest, it's not even a product right now. We are building something that we ourselves really needed, and we learned that the hard way, right? And probably we can get to that. I remember we connected some 2.5, 3 years back, and back then I would say that was the ZERP era. So a lot of money flowing around. Everyone was loving SaaS and sales tech, and so we were also very bullish on this entire LLM trend. In fact, that was the time when GPT-2 was going around, and not many people were aware of it, right? So we started kind of looking into these voice AI technologies and LLMs and what sort of things we could do, and we were very bullish on SaaS, as an opportunity area for that. So we tinkered around a fair bit. In a typical startup fashion, we launched 5 or 6 different products in quick succession. And one of our coolest products, or the products that kind of saw a lot of market interest, was this interview coach, which was a Telegram-based interview coach. And it was not even a proper interactive role play. You could just upload you would just press the record button, the mic button on, let's say, a typical Telegram or WhatsApp app, and you could essentially have a voice chat with that bot. And we did a bunch of things, with that. We were essentially looking at the B2C market, a number of use cases, interview prep. We were building a soft skills coach, just trying to see where we could really see a strong interest to pay, because back then we were essentially focused on the Indian market. So that was a very important factor for us, and we didn't really want to go the typical ed tech route back then, because we were also not very clear whether we were going to build, let's say, a quintessential ed tech, or whether it was going to be something else. But we were very fixated on seeing willingness to pay, even if actual monetization you could always take a conscious call, especially if you want to be a VC backed business eventually, right? So we did that, but what ended up happening is. All these use cases, the interview coaches and the soft skill coaching thing, we found this use case which was not for B2C but for B2B. Some people in the B2B space who were running their own startups, who were friends of mine, who I sent out the MVP sign up link for, they said, hey, could you do something like this for my customer facing teams? Right, so these were startups like Go Mechanic, Haptech. So they had their business development teams, their customer success teams, a couple of support teams as well, who really wanted to kind of do something along these lines. And this was not the time when products like Gong or Observe AI were even that popular. This was 2020, 2021, right? They may have been very popular in the US market, but in India, not many businesses were even aware of them. So that was the first moment, I would say, somewhere around 2021 end, when we realized that, okay, we have been exploring the B2C space, but B2B is really where
Money
we could
is
do something. Yeah, I mean, that is where real money would be, right? So that epiphany hit us, and yeah, we never looked back ever since.
great. That's a great journey. I mean, from building a Telegram bot to just have a conversation for the interviews, then now helping founders, right? And you mentioned very correctly, right, that every month something new is coming, especially after AI, right? Now we can see the trend of AI BDR and AI SDRs, right? And there are people who are just jumping on it and they are doing great and they're also getting good numbers. That's happening. And founder-led sales, yeah, of course. I mean, I remember there are a couple of companies who are just doing, good ARR in terms of a dollar, $1 million, something like that, and they have just 4 or 5 people team, and the founder are selling, right? There's one quote of Naval Ravikant: "If you learn sales, build something, right? Or if you can do both, you are unstoppable." So that's totally, yeah, that's totally going with you. Right? Puneet, just let me know one thing, right? The moment you were seeing that these founders who are coming to you to use your product, right? As you mentioned, most are the founders are tech founders, right? Who know how to build, but who don't know how to sell, right? So why they're not finding a co-founder who know how to sell?
That's a great question. So I'll actually take a step back and try to personify the types of founders that we typically see going around, right? So one would be, or other startups that we see going around. So one would be the kind of startup where you have a very clear demarcation of these responsibilities. Let's say a GTM founder and a product founder. There could be other tech founders as well. The second one is where nobody has any clue about what GTM is like. We'll just build a great product and they'll come, as they say. And the third category is where you'll have people like me who will think that they know how GTM works, or let's say what self-serve and PLG works. And yeah, I mean, we're gonna do great things because I've maybe run my college's cultural festival and stuff, and I know how to convert customers. I raised sponsorships worth crores of rupees. So how different would this be? So I would say second and the third category both, but in a GTM nascent country like India, I think the third category of startups is where you can place even a lot of the seed or series A funded companies. People think they know. I was also used to be that way. We used to believe that, hey, we clearly know how to build a kick-ass product because we are pedigree engineers, and how to take it to market. But the reality is, the way the market has shifted in the past 3-4 odd years, people who have had to reinvent their game on not just the product end but also on the positioning end. Right? People have had to change pricing like once every month, let's say, consistently for 2 or 3 quarters. So and I have many friends who have kind of done that. There are people who have completely shifted from B2C to B2B and then again back to B2C. Right? So that is also that's a real story, one of the top AI startups that I know. So to answer your question, I think nobody really thinks, at least in the Indian startup ecosystem, from a GTM first perspective. When we use the term builder, that is vindicated by Naval's quote, itself, as you mentioned. Whenever we use the word builder in the Bay Area context, they also use it for GTM. They actually say that, how are you building? How are you thinking about building your GTM? But in India or in the Indian context, typically when we use the word builder, we think in terms of a guy who codes. Am I wrong there?
No, no, totally. Yeah.
So that's what we have often seen, right? So it is,
Mhm.
I think it's only recently that that is kind of popping up in, both the founder psyche and investor psyche. And I think now, especially in this climate, people are realizing that building products is not where gaps lie. You can always be very resourceful. Either you hire somebody smart, or maybe you use some AI. You can get something out, but no AI can sell it for you. I mean, you can
True that.
pay for n number of AI SDRs and all. No, there's a lot of gray area there which people don't often talk about. Sure, a lot of AI SDR companies, automated selling companies, automated outbound companies are making a lot of money, but there's a lot of gray area there. A lot of those products are just selling to companies that have a very commoditized offering. So they're essentially playing the game of spray and pray, which will not be sustainable. That's my opinion, but happy to kind of have a discussion around that as well. So it's not
Yeah.
culturally ingrained in us, is what I would like to say. Getting a
Yeah.
GTM first.
Yeah, so I have a huge, observation in recent market trend. Earlier, what was happening? The product-led company were growing, right? You build an awesome product, great product, and then you will be, rule the market. But right now, it's not about the product; it's about the, distribution channel which you have. The more people know you and how you are selling, how you are making yourself different from others, right?
Yeah,
The marketing, the content, the people, the team, so all these companies are now focusing on brand building within themselves, within their organization. So CEO branding or CXO branding or teammates branding, and that's why they're able to do more sales and numbers in terms of growth, whether it's
yeah.
any company, right? I would also like to your take on AI part, right? So you are building a solution which helps founders to sell, right?
Yeah.
And as I can understand, you are not agree that AI will sell better than humans, right? For sure. So
And we're
what?
also using AI, leveraging AI ourselves within our
Mhm.
product. Everyone has to. Yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
this is what my question is, right? When you are using AI and you are teaching your clients that this AI is better to teach you, why they should choose your product and not go to a real human to learn those things?
Oh, so again, thanks for asking that question, because with the Spyro 1.0, which was the previous product that we were building, I will be the first one to raise my hand and say that that is one opinion, which was a strong opinion, but eventually proved to be loosely held. I will let go of that opinion now, because see, had I been that sort of a smart ass, I could have just claimed I'm using my own product and that made me a better seller. Did not happen, right? What it does is it does help you with some attributes of selling. If you, of course, practice hard, if you have really kick-ass playbooks, those kind of things, sure. It's kind of like a hygiene play. But with what we are building right now, we are not saying that our product will help you become a better seller. That's not the core of the promise. The promise is our product will basically force you to think in terms of 1 or 2 week micro campaigns, really short exercises wherein you are doing essentially a lot of rigorous A/B testing. So let's say you ask me, hey, what's your ICP? I'm building a founder-led sales product. I could say, hey, my ICP is actually early stage founders, people who have raised pre-seed or seed funding in the Indian market, and pretty much a similar definition in the US market as well. The reality is that's a completely vague and false definition of what my ICP is, right?
Glad that you know this. I literally there's so many people who don't know the concept of ICP. Thank you for
Yeah, I
mentioning this.
mean,
Okay,
yeah,
please, yeah.
humility through, yeah. So there's a lot that I could get into on this note, but yeah, there's a lot of humility that gets baked into by just trying to sell on your own with a lot of sincerity, is what I would say. And I wouldn't say that a lot of sales gyan that is there on LinkedIn, a lot of it is just pretty insincere. Everyone's doing great, even in this kind of a climate, which is not the case. So what I meant to say was our product is essentially designed to take you from the hypothetical versions of your customer profile, of your positioning, of your messaging, of even the channels, even though one could argue that you can't really run experiments on positioning and channels. You only have, like, at any given time, one really cast channel, or you only kind of have one type of positioning for, let's say, 6 to 12 odd months. But we believe that early on you can still experiment things out. And of course, messaging and customer profile, you have to experiment them out all the time. I would say that definition is changing literally on a bi-weekly, monthly basis. So in that sort of a noisy, ever changing, very dynamic sort of a market setting, you constantly have to reevaluate, rinse and repeat. And that's what we are kind of giving founders, people who are using Spyro right now. So we are not saying we're going to make you better sellers. We are saying, hey, you will become better sellers if you have experimentation as a mindset for your selling process.
Wow,
Yeah.
perfect. Puneet, now I literally wanted to go deeper in a brutal world of SaaS sales, right? So as you are selling, you are also a founder, right? And you know how hard it is. I mean, it's not glorifying world which everyone sees, right? Also, you are dealing with the founders who are trying to sell. What do you think? Where people get failed in terms of selling what they love to build? Why they're not
Hmm.
able to sell?
Okay, so I think mm,
Glad that I force you to think just like your tool,
no. So
Spyro.
I think the right way to think about this is, in the form of a pyramid. So there's actually a gamification pyramid framework which I use a lot. It's also there on my LinkedIn, but you can just search for it and you'll find it. So there's three parts to it. The high level reason, which is the dynamic, right? uh, the mid-level reason, which is the mechanics, and the end-level reason, which is the components, right? So very top level, very low level, right? I think when it comes to selling right now, what people are not realizing is that selling effectively always used to come from a place of intellectual honesty. Probably I'm using really complex terminology here, but if you look at the literature, all the Sandlers and all those guys of the world, they did not set out to create selling frameworks. At least the engineer in me, now I look at all of that literally as a bunch of machinations and frameworks that my engineering brain should try to kind of break down and decide. And I think the way sellers talk about them, hey, I do Sandler sales, that is absolute bollocks. That's that shit. Right? That should not mean anything. When those guys, or when the Sandlers of the world, or the people who came up with, let's say, the bands and the metrics, they were not really starting off from a place of diluting or distilling everything down to literally those few alphabets, but they were really coming in from a place of intellectual honesty. And what I mean by that is they were being very pragmatic, very honest with themselves as to what is really happening in the market and what is it that they are doing that is working, right? I would say that there is a significant lack of that sort of intellectual honesty in an influencer heavy era, right? I mean, that's a very top level reason. Everyone's a genius in sales tech or SaaS, right? Chris Orlov is a genius. I mean, sorry, Chris, if you're ever getting to watch this video, but you are not the reason why Gong went from 2 million or 250K in revenue to, let's say, 2 billion in revenue or whatever is the revenue, right? 300 million or whatever. The reality is that you did a lot of things right. Of course, you converted a lot of deals, but like n number of things, including the product, including a really hot market, including Zop, is what made it what it is right now, right? So I think when that doesn't happen, then a lot of the theories, a lot of the sales insights, tactics, simple stuff like cold call openers or the way you should write your email, I think there's literally zero relevant context in most of those discussions. Now, if you look like really bottoms up, at the bottommost level or at the tactical level, at the end of the day, as sellers or even as a founder who has to report to investors, our job is to meet our targets. I will use the word dishonesty here, but I will say intellectual dishonesty versus intellectual density. So lack of intellectual density, right? And what I mean by that is, you asked me this question. Hey, there's literally no content on your company page, or there's not a lot of
Right.
content, right? And that's a very fair point, right? But if I have to be really honest with myself, I'm building a founder-led sales product, which was essentially a founder-led outbound product. Does it make sense on day one for me to start putting out content? The answer is still a resounding yes, right? But the reason why a lot of people are putting content out on LinkedIn is because they know this guy Adam Robinson who's doing it, right? And that is not your reason for putting things out. Like this is a very this is still a very good scenario. In a lot of cases, people are posting content on LinkedIn when 80-90% of their ICP is not even on LinkedIn. But just because, hey, personal brand and 10,000 followers on LinkedIn, VC likes it, so you have to do that, right? This is what I call intellectual dishonest, lack of intellectual density, right? So I think intellectual density is really about being very self-aware where you need to put in your efforts and having a lot of intellectual density in terms of not just following what the market is, shouting about, but trying to have a very experimental approach, trying to have a very, I would say, ears to the ground sort of an approach. And I think that's kind of what we are trying to solve with this Spyro. But I will also be the first one to say that no AI, no product, no coach, nobody can ever make you a better seller. Selling makes you a better seller, right? So that makes me somewhat intellectually honest when it comes to selling. I hope, but I mean, that at a very high level, that's how I would describe it. And I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah,
very verbose. Maybe sometimes I'm not able to distill what I have to convey to the right
yeah,
words.
that's the perfect point, Puneet. And I have a two observation again, like because I'm talking to so many salespeople, so many people who are trying to come into SaaS sales, and they're trying to build, their career in it. There's a two kind of people who are doing sales. One, again, the founder-led sales people or the founding teams, and second, the people who are joining later on stage. The people
Hmm.
who are joining later on stage, or the people who are just working as a job. The problem is that they are trying to find a job which is secure. Sales is not a secure job. It's not going to be secure job if you are finding safety in it, right? It's always you have to be on toe. It's a
That's
number game. Nothing else. How good you are, how good speaking skills you have, how good you can write a mail, how good you look, doesn't matter. Do you have numbers? Then you are okay. If you don't have numbers, doesn't matter who you are, what you're doing, what kind of personal brand you have, what kind of personal brand you don't have.
hmm.
No one give a shit about that, right? Second, even the founding members and all those people, I feel like they restrict the self after certain time, which worked out for them, and they try to work out that old strategy again and again and again. That's the problem which I figure out, that if some cold emailing worked for me 2 months back, I'll try to build again a new sequence or try to generate a new mail campaign or something like that. And I will expect that this mail campaign will give me same numbers which I got in previous one, right? That might not be happen. So you have to try all those different things, and that people are not doing it, right?
So
Now,
true.
I would also like to know, right? When you are building this company, when you are helping founders to sell more, right? Uh, what kind of things, right, which anyone can do to get more numbers and grow their company, right? When we are talking about grow their company, it's not just about the sales part, but also other things which they have to learn apart from sales.
Well, very, I would say, critical theme for the Indian startup ecosystem, at least, right? Because um, Reid Hoffman, the LinkedIn founder, LinkedIn guy, he recently mentioned that everyone says, "Hey, fail fast when
Hmm.
you're building a startup," but that's fine. If you are failing, then it's always great to, out of all the ways in which you fail, it's great if you fail fast. But hey, try your best not to fail. I think please don't forget that, right? People don't highlight that enough. People have made it fashionable to fail. So, what I would say is how I would describe the most important thing that founders or founding team members or even the people who come after that is to have a very systems centric approach. That is not just true for selling, but also for product building, for anything that you are doing. I think we speak in terms of, hey, ship fast, do things really quickly, blah, blah, blah. But imagine if in the world of AI, if uh, products are not where your moats lie, selling is not where your moats lie, where does, if at all, any moat, lie? I think it's in your tribal knowledge or your deep understanding of how a TAM would work. let's say you are building a product for sellers. Now, whether sellers would love to use another outbound, the 10,000 outbound product, or they would love to use the 10,000 CRM, or whether they would need, let's say, the 100th research tool. You know why you strongly believe in some market need. Let's say at uh, December 2024, and that tribal knowledge will keep getting evolved every month, every quarter, right? But if you don't do these things the right way, you don't document things enough, you don't have a very systems centric approach for a very early stage startup. What are systems? These are things like detailed playbooks, right talk tracks, literally define what ICPs are, what ICP iterations are, describe product, describe ICP personas, right? Those kind of things. So that even if you hire the fifth person or the 50th person, they immediately have a way of knowing, okay, this is what the founders knew on day zero, and this is how they have day by day built things out, right? At least in the Indian startup ecosystem, I can tell you there's probably a handful of companies which do things this way. And if you go to the Western ecosystem or even let's say the Israeli ecosystem, I can bet my life on this. They are amazing at documentation. They're amazing at thinking in terms of systems. I mean, Notion, the founders of Notion have literally written a detailed set of blogs on how they simplified the entire black and white design scheme, to kind of pace up the development process, but also the selling process and stuff. They've documented it not just for their own team, but for the entire world to kind of gain from. So I would also say that this somewhat is a natural activity for tech teams because they do require commenting, maintaining detailed documentation. Otherwise, the CTO, how he has kind of coded the entire thing out, the next engineer in line wouldn't even understand. So they still, uh, those guys are still good at documentation and maintaining proper um, links to where things are, and how do you navigate through stuff. But despite all these tools that are out there in the market, tens of thousands of productivity tools and stuff like that, it still doesn't happen because everyone is a seller essentially in an early stage startup. The founders are, the marketers are, the sellers are, even founding office folks are, but everyone handles some different aspect of selling, and that is where the problems come in, is what I believe. I mean, if you were to ask me, for most successful startups, it's very interesting actually. In India, at least, the most successful B2B SaaS companies are almost always the ones where you've had really successful and longest tenured founding office members.
The core members.
Yeah. So people who joined in early on in founder's office ended up staying for 5, 10, 15 odd years. They were literally, in many of those cases, they were literally at the IPO bell. In case of Freshworks, that's true. In case of Nutanix, that's true. Right? Browser Stat may or may not go for an IPO, still very true. Right?
Yeah.
So what is happening? The guy who's around the founders are telling this guy, hey dude, just punch everything down in the form of easily navigable directories, documentation, so that the 100th guy or the 1,000th guy also is on the same page. And so I think that as a mindset, relaying information to the last person in the line as an ethos is something that is a very founder driven thing. Nobody can teach you that. I had to learn, unlearn, and relearn it. That is when you are facing a tough market, when you are really facing a lot of selling pressure, product pressure, you say, dude, screw documentation. I don't have the, like, that is the last of my worries. That's exactly the time when you need to over document. Right? Nobody tells you that as a founder. And if you don't, if you lose that track, if you don't do it, then even if you might have been really good at it, at the starting point, you tend to lose that knack. So that is a very big one, like having a very systems heavy approach. And I would say the second thing is, uh, I mean, probably you will kill me for this, but I actually relate a lot with your statement. I think selling at large, actually, I'll phrase this in another way. There's no sales and marketing. When we say sales, marketing is kind of baked into that. Or when a marketer says, "Hey, I'm the chief marketing guy or marketer, product marketer," selling is kind of baked into that, right?
Hmm.
So at large, it's just one role only now. You
Yeah.
have to market yourself. You can't say, "Hey, no, we'll just run very nice outbound campaigns." No, not really. I mean, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And there's reasons, really strong reasons why I have also started feeling that, because you ask anyone legitimate in the world of SaaS sales or GTM. In fact, there's a lot of data on this from this year. The best performing sales channel this year was what? Do you have any idea? You share a lot of those articles and links. It's actually
Yeah.
events, face-to-face events.
Yeah. Hmm.
Nobody is able to
Totally.
like
Yeah. 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 True that.
legit traction on LinkedIn or
Hmm.
email or other means. It's or even cold calling, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's face to face, and when that is happening under that sort of a dynamic, you can't be pushy about pitching your product. You also have to be good at marketing it, so that when people are ready, when they follow you, when they go through your content, they are able to make the purchase when the moment is right. Yeah.
True
So
that. True, and I would definitely agree. So we also learn very hard way, right? So from last 1 year, we started doing the documentation. We started doing the making the process. We started doing making. We have now objection sheet for all the SDRs. We are combining them again and again with all the answers. And whenever the new one comes in, we send it that these are the objections which we have already handled. These are the questions. These are answers. You will find it. Uh, these are
that's
the
wonderful.
processes, yeah, and these are the process for this kind of solution. You have to go to this person, this department, these will help you, and all sort of things. We have already done it, and this we learned after 2 years, because when we know that I cannot be there all the time for them, or maybe someone else will
Yeah,
not be there all the time. So you need the process and system on place where they can simply go and check that out, that where they have to go and how they have to do things, right? And that's the exact thing every company should know, especially in SaaS, because there's so many dynamics coming in, there's so many changes happening, and that's the only way you can survive for a longer run, when you have the documentation
absolutely,
on place. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, Puneet,
Funny thing
there's a
is, I
one
mean,
thing.
if I could
Yeah, yeah.
just add on this, I think it's nobody's KPI to do this well. It's very rarely, kind of codified in that sense. And I also learned this the hard way. So for our, role play based sales coaching product, the one that we were building earlier, I can tell you, like, officially, there's a lot of people in the Indian SaaS ecosystem, all big stars on LinkedIn. They're always talking in terms of, hey, you need to have playbooks, you need to coach your reps, you need to handhold them, sit with them, listen to their call recordings and whatnot, right? We reached out to pretty much every well-known name, uh, most of them in the Indian SaaS space,
You
also
haven't
some of
reached out to me.
you'll see why that's a good thing, right? So we reached out to all of them, and they were all like, "Hey, this is awesome. We really need a product like this." Blah blah blah. Over the next few months, it became pretty clear to us that what they were claiming on LinkedIn and how they execute things at the ground level, there's a big gap, right? So again, intellectual dishonesty, right? So
Yeah,
why I phrase it that way. What you are saying is not what you are doing, right? So there's
right.
clearly you are saying the things which get you the most likes, or probably get you a better offer from the next big SaaS. Uh, However, since they were in all these amazingly performing SaaS companies, pretty much every single time they had amazing documentation, amazing systems in place, and who were the ones who were building it? Pretty much some of the most unknown but most admired managers, sales leaders, right? People who will not probably have the flashiest of, let's say, English accents, right? Because they
Yeah,
come from that place that I struggle. Many of them literally come from the world of call centers and stuff, right? So I struggle a lot with speaking English, which is why I really wanted people to kind of be comfortable with jumping on cold calls and stuff like that, right?
right, right,
So that guy is never going to be concerned with going on LinkedIn because, and I asked a bunch of them, dude, why the hell are you not active on LinkedIn? I forced a bunch of them to be, out there because they became good friends because they never really had the time to do all those things. They were always trying to improve. Let's say if they were on their weekly with their entire team, they never just jumped on those weekly catch-up calls to give people, some gyan or some feedback, quote unquote. They always used to go back and improve the playbook or that little, document where some sales script or something has been written. And that's how everyone gains and everyone benefits from it. The entire team benefits from it, right?
true that, true
I
that.
think there's no KPI around this. I don't know why. People have built product, this and that, but cost wise, it's, we still have a long way to go. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like this should be coming from the founder. So right now, every time whenever we are sitting down, right, me and my founders always talk like, let's do the process settlement for this department. Let's make the process for this. That what exactly that person have to do. Even we have every mail sequence process, right? For after this conversation, you have to do this. You have to do this. So onboarding a client, and the moment you are onboarding a client, you have to schedule meetings for next 3 months for the feedback calls and also things that you have to book the calendar then and there, all sort of things. So you have already figured out, and that's the way we are going ahead. But it one thing which I definitely like to know from you, because you have already done it and you have seen the people doing it, right? uh, as a salesperson, it's relevantly easier to move from B2C to B2B, but
Mm.
as a product, as a company, as a founder, what is makes it difficult to move yourself from B2C to B2B companies, and why it's hard to do that?
Again, a great question. I would also like to share with you that two of my very good friends, one of them is actually a pretty big AI companies out of India, generative AI companies, one of the top in the world. They routinely get listed in A16Z and stuff like that. They're also going through this transition. And I think pretty much considering all other equalizers, you can always hire talent. Let's say you can always hire B2B guys, you can get mentors. VCs can probably help you through that transition. But pretty much the only thing that decides your fate in this transition, based on my limited experience, is founder comfort or founder
Hmm.
DNA. B2C is by design. Like my wife, for example, she's only worked in B2C product management all her life. And she knows all about the world of B2B. I keep sharing things with her. She keeps attending all these mixers and stuff. Even her own company has a major B2B biz dev component, and she just hates it. Why? Because she likes that high growth, high octane B2C, quick experimentation.
The quick dopamine.
Yeah, let's run a quick marketing experiment. Let's put some money in this, influencer campaign or whatever, right? So they are very habituated with that sort of a behavior. Whereas most, I would say, solid B2B guys, I'm not including PLG or, let's say even in many cases SMB type use cases, because they're much closer to B2C if we are being very
Hmm.
honest. But
Yeah.
if you're selling to mid market or enterprise, then those personalities or the kind of founders that do really well at it are, I hate to use the word, but I'm also one of those, slightly more boring or low entropy, right? So people who understand, hey, it's a patience play. It's kind of like Yashasvi Jaiswal versus Pujara. Right? So for enterprise selling, you need a blocker, a really solid defender. Whereas for the world of B2C, you just need somebody who's willing to take their chances, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's pretty much the biggest decider. There's enough people, with that said, there's enough people that do tend to do solidly on both the fronts, but founder quickness, founders iteration ability, how quick they are able to rinse, repeat, readjust. I think that's the biggest deciding factor in B2C versus B2B.
And I always admire the consultancy firms, right? That just like McKinsey, EY, or KPMG, they are the solid B2B players, right? Just go and understand how they work, right? Because they are dealing with the top companies, and those companies are again very hard to manage. They are just giving the consultancy part of it, right? Where you just have to make sure that you have the upper hand. Again, you have to maintain the relation. You also have to maintain the vendors for those companies, and
Yes,
there are so many boring things which you have to do, right? There's so many
yes,
boring way you have to figure out. You have to do again the documentation part. I have learned because the B2B taught me that you have to prepare a documentation of 25 pages, which your other client will not need it. But for this
yes,
client, you have to prepare a security documents, you have to prepare a balance sheet, you have to make sure, because whenever you go for any large enterprise, they're not going to only buy your product, they're going to understand that how capability you have to run a business for longer run, because they're going to get dependent on you for next 4 or 5 years. And for
yes,
transitioning one software to another software, it's a bigger cost than your MRR or ARR subscription.
yes,
So that's,
absolutely.
yeah, and that's required so much patience, so much calmness, and you also have to have that kind of the genetic which you mentioned, the founder genetic, which helps you to be calm and also aggressive at the same time. So that's true.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, in the past 3 years itself, there's um, very marketing heavy or marketing DNA type founders have generally done well or done better, right? B2B type founders have done much better in the pre-ZERP or pre-2022 era. In
Yeah.
general, that's true, right? Why? Because if you, what was the strength of the type 2 founder? If they were to say, hey, I can actually go through a 12-month long selling cycle, but still convert this $1.5 million contract, that's awesome. But
Yeah.
even that is not happening now, right? That 12
Hmm.
months could be 18 months, it could be 24 months. Nobody really knows, right? Or somebody else could come in and take that deal away, right? So
Right.
that is how it is. I think that is why even to convert those kind of deals, people are talking so much about founder led sales, founder brand. So I mean, we also understood that. When we started using the word founder led sales, we personally meant founder led outbound because we ourselves never knew enough about founder led marketing. In the
Hmm.
past 2 months, that has completely changed, which is why I'm saying like sales by design now means sales and marketing and other things and
Right.
so forth.
Right. Great, Puneet. I have a one last question, right? And this might be, gonna change so many people's life because it's a very critical one, right? So, uh, whenever we talk about building a company, we always think about product in sales generally, right? Always everybody thinks that अच्छा product banate hain. Let's build some good product. This is the tool. This is the tool. This is the tool. This is the tool, right? And that's why we can see there's so many copy paste tools are already there in market, right? Uh, for you, apart from tool and apart from sales, right? Let's remove these both part. What else required to build a company?
Patience,
Perfect. Okay.
whether it's a B2C company, B2B company, whether it's a SaaS, e-commerce, generative AI, like whatever it is. You've got to be really patient, especially even more so going forward, right?
Hmm.
So you really have to be able to take a lot of pain,
Hmm.
right? I will also say none of those things that you mentioned, building a great product, building great GTM. I think we now live in a world where you could win despite having any of those. Right
True.
now, the best B2B companies that are coming up, almost none of them are SaaS companies,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of like cold like you guys who knows about them, what they are doing. They're just an agency, and that too, they are mostly an implementation agency. They
Right.
don't do a whole lot of 0 to 1 for you, right? But they're still pretty credible. So I would say that all the older rules, they are kind of now irrelevant, even if not completely so. But the one thing that is differentiating great companies from average companies still is, yeah, just a lot of patience, grit, belief, humility, intellectual honesty. I mean, I just, the words that I use, you will keep seeing me use them even in, face to face gatherings, right? So I completely stand by all the things that I've already covered. But yeah, patience
Mm,
is the biggest one, because what patience gives you is pretty much what people are trying to gain when they raise a big round of funding. Uh,
mm,
when you raise $1 billion, or let's say a billionaire kid, somebody whose family has run a lot of businesses. What is being wealthy essentially in the context of running a business? Being wealthy essentially means you get more shots at the target, right?
true that.
You can fail more, right? A
Mm,
middle class guy or the little guy, probably they don't have that sort of a bandwidth. They'll take a stab, but if they'll give it their all, but if it doesn't work, then cool. Maybe for the next few years they can't really take shot two. But if you are patient, if you are gritty enough, then you kind of become really headstrong. You maybe try to eke a few extra shots in there. Like we
mm,
have been that way. We have been complete rats. We didn't really go out and raise any big amount of funding for a considerable, I would say, noisy period of 1.5, 2 odd years when everyone around us was going out and raising money. And all those SaaS companies are shutting doors. And we are wondering out, hey, like, what the hell just happened? Like, all these guys had so much money. There's literally a friend of mine who raised $4 million, returned 2.5 or 3 mil out of that. It's gonna be in the news soon.
mhm,
And he's a great GTM guy, and he said it didn't work out, right? And we were like, dude, we never had that luxury. So what is it that at least right now we are still alive, right? So the only thing that differentiated at least us from them and many others would be belief and grit and patience.
mm. And I totally agree with you, right? So I always suggest people or whomever, whatever they wanted to do, I suggest that take a plan for a decade, right? Work with companies where you wanted to work for next 10 years. Work with people where you wanted to work with them for next 10 years. Choose a career where you wanted to be for next 10 years. Try out multiple things. When you figure out that this is the thing where I can be for 10 years, be there. Doesn't matter whatever happen. You are getting 3x hike or 5x hikes or 10x hikes, doesn't matter. Just be there for next 10 years, and then you know that what exactly happening, right? So I was recently, getting to know lots of this EY and consultancy firms, right? McKinsey and all. So the people who are into this kind of company for 10 years, they are likely to get more successful than any other industries. They become partners, right? And but the problem is like, because there is so much stress, so much work pressure, that people quit within 2 or 3, 4 years. And we have the news and EY work culture and all sort of things, right? But
Yeah,
the people who tolerate and be there and keep the patience, they're the one who win the world.
yeah. So me and my wife are two of such individuals. I was an investment banker at JP Morgan. My wife is actually ex BCG. So we both
You both, yeah.
we know what it takes. So we both
Yeah,
know. But yeah,
yeah, great.
reach. Great.
Yeah, yeah,
Wonderful
great.
conversation.
Thank you so much for being with us. I mean, a great having you on this podcast, and looking forward to get you here again, once again, after a certain time.
Absolutely, man. Hit me up whenever you are in Bangalore. Or whenever I'm in Delhi, I will.
For
So,
sure. Let's meet and have a more kick ass.
yes, for sure.